Hello everyone, it's 7 o'clock. This is Sky News Breakfast. Parts of the UK are waking up to freezing temperatures, snow and icy winds this morning. Hundreds of drivers have been trapped for hours by heavy snow on the M62 in West Yorkshire, with the traffic barely moving. Also ahead, we'll speak to the Foreign Secretary live from Paris about Rishi Sunak's summit with the French president and his hopes for a deal to stop asylum seekers. It's Friday, the 10th of March. Motorways brought to a standstill by heavy snow.
I've got my 15-year-old son here with me. I think he thought I was being dramatic, but I was like, we need to take blankets.
We are live at a service station on the M62 as Storm Larissa causes widespread disruption.
Plus, the gunman caught on camera before an act of mass murder at a Jehovah's Witness meeting hall in Hamburg. This is the scene right now where 8 people were killed. Police are still trying to work out exactly what happened. The latest growth figures for the economy are out right now. We'll bring them to you in just a moment.
And it's not just the snow making the trains late. The government has delayed sections of HS2, and some trains may not make it into central London until 2040.
With just 2 days to go until the Oscars, we'll be live in Los Angeles, looking ahead to the biggest night of the year for the film industry. And meet Peggy, officially Britain's ugliest dog. But we think she's gorgeous. Hello, a very good morning to you. Now, parts of the country are waking up to heavy snow, ice and blizzards. The bad weather has brought some roads to a standstill, including the M62 in the north of England. Hundreds of drivers were trapped in their cars overnight, and one woman told Sky News how she picked up her 15-year-old son from a concert at Victoria Warehouse in Manchester just after 11 o'clock last night. Their journey home to Lincoln would normally take just over 2 hours, but they are still on the motorway.
We've managed to keep the heaters on, and before we left, I've got my 15-year-old son here with me. I think he thought I was being dramatic, but I was like, we need to take blankets, we need to take coats just in case, so we were well prepared.
Well, we made Inzi Rashid go and stand outside in the cold. He was meant to be in Halifax, but he's only made it as far as a service station on the M62. And Inzi, tell us a little bit about your journey and how it's looking out there now.
Well, the roads are treacherous. There's no denying that. The M62 motorway, we're pretty much up to the point where the traffic starts, just before junction 19. And actually, in both directions, it is pretty poor. There are lanes blocked off because there is so much snow drift, which has caused some of those lanes just to be completely unusable. And on one side going towards and over the Pennines, it is really, really terrible, where that lady who we were speaking to earlier today has basically trapped. There is traffic, which is just like a car park on the M62, and it's caused hundreds of cars to completely pile up to around 10 miles back, which is a real concern for many people this Friday morning. Of course, the snow was falling right throughout the night. Heavy snow, thick snow has fallen right across many parts of the country, particularly here in North England. As you mentioned, we were meant to be going over the Pennines and into Yorkshire. That was just made impossible because of the sheer amount of traffic on the road caused by the sheer amount of snow on the road. High winds as well, around 50 miles an hour in the early hours of this morning. And the snow is expected to fall for the next 5 to 6 hours. But it is only supposed to be this kind of block this morning where we are expected to see that heavy rainfall, when hopefully that snowfall, when hopefully later it will ease off slightly. But the disruption is widespread. Many schools will be closed across this region, and many people won't be able to get into work. And of course, as we've mentioned, the motorways really blocked this morning and causing disruption across this region.
OK, Inzi, thanks very much indeed. Really miserable start for so many people in that area this morning. So let's take you over now to our meteorologist, Steph Goulter, who's in Winchester. So, Steph, any hope of a reprieve? It looks, well, a lot less snowy there where you are, but how does the weather look over the next 24 hours or so?
Yeah, Anna, we're to the south of all of that, so it's just started raining here. I'm regretting not having a brolly with me, but the whole storm is swirling over sort of the central parts of the country, and it's the northern parts of that swirling mass where we're seeing the snow, and further south, where we're in the milder air, we're seeing rain. So for the warnings then, we did have a warning over Northern Ireland, but that has now expired. There are still problems with heavy snow there at the moment, though. The amber warnings now are over sort of the Pennine area and northern parts of Wales. In North Wales, we've seen 20 centimetres of snow we have lying on the ground at the moment, 16 in parts of Yorkshire. But that whole swirling mess is moving southwards. So those amber warnings will gradually come to a halt during the day today. Around midday, they should fade out. And then we're just going to see the wet and windy weather slip away towards the southeast, and it should improve.
OK, well, that's I'll cling on to those last words. Steph, thanks very much indeed. Now, the latest growth figures for the economy have just been published, so let's get all the latest, shall we? Joining me from the newsroom is our business correspondent, Paul Kelso. So, Paul, what do they tell us about the state of the economy then?
They tell us that the economy performed slightly better than expected in January, bouncing back from a flat December with growth of 0.3% in January. That's higher, certainly, than economists expected. It's not overall good news. 3 months going back from January was flat at 0%. If you take the year to January as a whole, there was also no growth. But what drove this bounce back was a number of things that returned in January. Schools went back. Education's counted in the GDP figures. The Office for National Statistics say the return of the Premier League after the World Cup break in December. That also helped increase spending in services. Human health activities, as the ONS rather dryly describes growing to the gym. That was another driver of services bouncing back and lifting growth, 0.3% growth above expectations and cancelling out declines in construction and manufacturing, which speak of the rather more stubborn underlying trends that are depressing growth in the economy. But a little glimmer of something to perhaps not celebrate, but be pleased about as the Chancellor prepares for his budget next Wednesday.
Indeed. Paul, thanks very much indeed. Now, 8 people have been killed in a mass shooting at a Jehovah's Witness meeting hall in the German city of Hamburg. Police say the gunman acted alone, but there's not yet any reliable information on the motive. Well, police in Hamburg say they were called at around 9:15 p.m. after reports of shots being fired in the Grossborstel district of the city. They believe that one of the bodies found on an upper floor of the building in Dielbuger Street may have been the perpetrator. Our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports, and her report starts with images of the gunman.
In Hamburg, in the shadows, a figure by a window. Gunfire rings out. Here, an alleged perpetrator caught on camera as shots are fired at people inside a Jehovah's Witness meeting hall.
Ich bin Anwohner hier oben und habe laute Schüsse gehört.
I'm a resident up here and I heard loud gunshots. So I went to the window to get an idea of the situation. Then I saw that a man was shooting out of the window with a firearm. There were people being carried out, and there were probably 25 shots at least that I heard.
It was just after 9 o'clock when police were called to the building in the Grossborstel district. Inside, a truly horrific scene.
The police officers who went in there then also found people who have been seriously injured by firearms and some fatally injured. The officers themselves then also heard another shot from the upper part of the property and went upstairs and found another person there as well.
Officers believe a person they found fatally wounded upstairs may have been the attacker. But the motive for the shooting is still unclear. Hamburg's mayor tweeted, "The reports from Ulsterdorf are shocking. I extend my deepest sympathy to the families of the victims." Police are still trying to work out exactly what happened, what sparked an act of mass violence, which has left a city mourning.
Well, let's just show you the scene outside the building where that shooting took place. We'll update you, of course, on any of the latest developments as and when we get them. Now, it's not just the bad weather making the trains late. The government has announced that sections of the new high-speed 2 rail line are being delayed by another 2 years, and services might not get into Euston Station in central London until 2040. Well, our correspondent, Rachel Venables, joins me now from North London. So the latest delay has been announced. Rachel, what's the reason behind it?
Essentially, this is all about money. We're looking here at a 2-year delay to Britain's biggest infrastructure project, HS2, the high-speed railway running from London up to the North Midlands and then eventually the West Midlands, then eventually going further into northern cities. The government has said, though, that with inflationary pressures and increased project costs, they're going to have to delay the project by 2 years, particularly the Birmingham to Crewe leg, which now won't be completed until it's thought the mid-2030s. Of course, this is a project that is already tens of billions of pounds over budget, and this does call into question the government's levelling up agenda. There's been real fury since this statement was put to the House of Commons yesterday at around 5 o'clock, so towards the end of play of the day. Now, we're also hearing that the London leg is going to be delayed as well. And for around a decade, trains will be stopping here at Old Oak Common in West London rather than going into Euston. Euston Station opening has been delayed as well for affordability reasons, rather putting into question, of course, HS2, a high-speed rail link's purpose if people have to come here to Old Oak Common and then jump on the Elizabeth line into central London.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Rachel, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's take a look now at some of the day's other headlines. And the cost of prescriptions on the NHS in England is set to rise by more than 3% from the 1st of April. The Department of Health has announced that the cost of a prescription will rise by 30p to £9.65. England is the only country in the UK that still charges, with Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland all ditching the fees over a decade ago. The NHS is being warned that GPs are facing insurmountable pressures. A report by the Royal College of GPs suggests that 1 in 4 doctors fear their practice is in danger of closing because of unmanageable workloads and rising demand, with winter-style pressures lasting well into spring and summer. People planning to travel to Ibiza over the summer are being warned of an increased risk of dengue fever on the island. It comes after 6 German tourists were infected while visiting between August and November last year. Now, it's 2 days to the Oscars and excitement is building for the biggest day of the year in Hollywood. And it's a big day too for Sky News, which is going to come live from the red carpet on Sunday evening. And I'm joined now by our entertainment correspondent, Katie Spencer, also live now from LA. So, Katie, how much is the excitement building there?
Look, you can feel really how buzzing this town is already. It's only Thursday. The Oscars, of course, is happening on Sunday night. But go along any of these hotels on Sunset Strip, they're all pretty much sold out. You can see when you go past the hotels as well, various parties happening. We're not far away where we are at the moment from the Chateau Marmont, and outside of there, that of course is where all of the celebrities themselves generally go to stay when the Oscars are happening. There's a big queue of limousines outside of there. Obviously there's a big party happening there tonight, one suspects. But yeah, look, already people are getting very excited. At this stage though, is there a clear winner? Well, I would have said if you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, certainly it did seem like that everything was still up in the air, really. But since then, one film in particular, Everything Everywhere All at Once, seems to be the one that everyone is tipping to win Best Picture. It's won the Directors Guild Award, it's won the Producers Guild Awards, it's won the SAG Awards main prize for Best Picture as well. And really it does seem, going into this Sunday ceremony, given that all of those people that are members of those boards are also members of the Academy, it would seem that that would certainly be the one to beat. As for the other awards, it's not quite so predictable, really. Certainly when it comes to something like Best Supporting, I think from the very start of this award season, people were saying Best Supporting Actress has to go to Angela Bassett. She's been nominated a few times in her career, never won before. It just seems, sometimes you have years when it just seems to be somebody's turn, really. She's nominated for Black Panther. Everyone at the start of the award season was saying she is the one to beat. However, at the BAFTAs, of course, it went to Kerry Condon for The Banshees of Inisherin. Now, could she do the same this weekend? Certainly in terms of Irish actors winning, it would be a great thing if she manages to pull that off. And actually, earlier today, we've only just got off a plane today. We headed straight to a party to try and get hold of a few stars for you, and I managed to catch up with Kerry Condon. Here's what she said about how she's found the whole of award season.
It was great to win at the BAFTAs, yeah, of course, because I'd started my career very much in London, and so it was kind of a full circle moment. And but the awards, it's crazy. Like, it's so much work. It really is, and especially I'm the kind of person who wouldn't really go out much. So for me, it's a big thing to be going out all the time.
But one thing organisers don't want to see this weekend is another slap, similar to what happened with Will Smith. And to make sure they're very certain that they don't have a scenario like that, they have appointed a special crisis team. And apparently, according to organisers who briefed the press earlier this week, they've been playing out various sort of scenarios. Lord knows what scenarios they've been attempting to work out and plan for. But they have been doing everything they can to make sure that if that sort of thing ever happened again, they would be prepared and they would be ready to act. One thing they can't prepare for, though, is the weather. We know it's going to rain here tomorrow. It's due to rain on Saturday. Everyone will be keeping their fingers crossed with their designer gowns on that it doesn't rain on Sunday. I certainly will be.
You don't want a soggy red carpet, do you? That's not glamorous. By the way, very, very pleased that you're so devoted to your work, straight off the plane into a party. Very impressive, Katie. Thanks very much indeed. Doing her bit for Sky News. And just to let you know, you can watch full coverage of this year's Oscars here on Sky News and Sky Showcase. And it all kicks off with one special hour programme on the red carpet in Hollywood from 11 p.m. on Sunday. And then we'll be live with all the winners on breakfast on Monday morning. So don't forget to tune into all of that. Meanwhile, here today, still to come here on the show, I'm going to be joined by the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, looking ahead to today's summit between Rishi Sunak and President Macron. So the UK economy appears to be on the up. We'll be talking about what that might mean for interest rates and the Chancellor's budget. And then at 7:45, we'll speak about the pressures on GPs with Professor Camilla Hawthorne from the Royal College of GPs. Now, they are the disappeared migrants who arrived in the UK illegally but who have intentionally abandoned their asylum claims and chosen to go underground. Until now, their voices have been missing from the debate over new proposals outlined this week. Well, Sky News has heard their fears of deportation and seen firsthand what it's really like to live and work in the shadows. Our communities correspondent Lisa Holland has this report.
Late morning and near a train station in South London, we've arranged to meet three men who came to the UK to seek asylum. They don't want us to know where they're staying.
So you've all gone underground?
Yes, ma'am.
All disappeared?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Living outside of society?
Yes, ma'am.
In a week which has seen the government ratchet up its strategy to stop people entering the country illegally, we can reveal threats to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda were already driving those here into hiding. Dravid is from India and flew to the UK using fake documents.
I don't want to attend the Home Office to proceed my claim.
You don't want to risk it?
No, I don't want to risk it.
So what are you afraid of? That if you report in, that they'll detain you?
They maybe detain me and they can send me to Rwanda.
It means anyone in authority, like the police, terrifies them.
I am very nervous and suffering, and I go to another way.
Ayudson and Abinthan say they're Tamils who fled from persecution and torture in Sri Lanka. They crossed the channel by small boat. After risking their lives to get here, they're also now ditching their asylum claims.
I came to 3 attempts on my boat. Second time
you tried 3 times?
Yeah, second time it pushed me water,
You capsized?
Yeah, it pushed me out water. Then I swimming inside. Third time is attempt come.
Third time lucky. But did you think that your life here would be like it is now, on the run?
Not now and not like it. No.
But going into hiding can make it difficult to access some medical care, and leaving the hotel accommodation provided by the government for asylum seekers whilst their claims are being processed.
everyone that we've spoken to says they're only really able to exist outside of the system because they're offered somewhere to live or given cash-in-hand work by people they know within their own community.
But for those going underground, here's a glimpse into the future.
Tomorrow is the day to taking all cardboards.
Kanaga Sabathi is paid cash in hand by other Sri Lankans to do cleaning and maintenance work. He came to the UK nearly 20 years ago and also says he fled persecution. He's lived in this garage for 5 years since his asylum claim failed. He's very aware the Home Office is stepping up raids on undocumented migrants living illegally like him. It's a miserable and lonely existence.
So for you, this is a normal life?
This is my normal life. I don't know what is the difference because I'm struggling to here, but this is my normal life.
Do you know a lot of people who live like you live?
Yeah, I have one or two friends. They are also live like that. Sometimes they're sleeping on the road. At least I got something. That's what I think.
It's estimated there could be around 1 million migrants living illegally in Britain, fueling the cash-in-hand economy. Another problem for a government desperately trying to stop anyone else from joining its broken asylum system. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
To Ukraine now, after the head of the world's nuclear regulator said he was astonished at international complacency after yet another power outage at Europe's biggest nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. It's not known if the damage was caused by the latest wave of Russian missile strikes across Ukraine, which killed more than 6 people. Our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey reports now from Kyiv.
Police search for fragments of the missile that hit this residential neighbourhood in Kyiv. They want to know exactly what it was. The Russians fired a whole range of weapons across the country, shattering the morning peace with devastating effect. Cars caught fire as the missile crashed into the ground. In the car park, they surveyed the damaged vehicle, seeing what they could repair. I wondered if they're getting used to all of this.
Hope for the best.
But the war goes on, right?
For sure. All the wars in the history, they're once and all they're over. So I hope it's gonna be fast and the peace comes soon.
Council workers began delivering rolls of plastic sheeting for people to repair their windows as best as possible. It's relatively mild at the moment, but the temperature here can plummet in a matter of hours.
There has been a break, but these type of incidents have been happening across Ukraine for months now. As civilian population aren't getting used to it at all. They live in constant fear that their sort of completely innocuous residential area could be the next one to get hit.
Larissa took me into her apartment. She told me she thought her balcony was going to fall off as she was shaken by the explosion. I asked her what she thought of Russia and the war.
Если слышат меня мои друзья, услышат там, которые всю жизнь я с ними прожила, прослужила, будь они прокляты все. Я переживаю не за себя, я старый человек. Я за детей переживаю, за внуков, за своих. Я хочу, чтобы это как можно скорее прекратилось. Чтобы этот Путин сдох, скотина.
This was a massive Russian attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. A power station in Kyiv burned through the morning after a direct hit. By afternoon, the fire was out, but there have been widespread power cuts caused by the attack. Crucially, and potentially catastrophically, the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant was temporarily cut from the grid. That's for the 6th time. Listing this response from the nuclear watchdog.
Each time we are rolling a dice. And if we allow this to continue time after time, then one day our luck will run out.
Air raid sirens periodically sounded throughout the day. After 3 weeks of quiet, residents once again returned to the safety of the metro to await the all clear. It's part of life now, working from the underground. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Kyiv.
Now, we're expecting to talk to the Foreign Secretary very shortly. He's on his way to Paris with the Prime Minister ahead of a big meeting with President Macron. Rob Powell, our political correspondent, as you can see, is here with me. So tell us about this meeting. How important is it?
Yeah, it's the Anglo-French summit, the first one for 5 years. They usually happen most years, but we haven't had one, partly because of COVID, but partly, as both sides acknowledge, because it's been a little frostier, shall we say, in recent years between the cross-channel relationship, mainly because of Brexit, but clearly previous prime ministers took quite a different approach when it came to diplomatic relations with France than we have done in the past. Clearly, this is set against what we heard earlier this week with the Prime Minister and the government's big plan to try and tackle cross-channel migration and stop the small boats coming across, and that will clearly form part of the talks that are taking place today. It's the Prime Minister going over, but also quite a few of his senior ministers that will engage with talks with their counterparts as well. What we are told in terms of what to expect, the Prime Minister and Number 10 have said that they want the French to go further when it comes to tackling cross-channel migration. There's been some talk of whether there could be a returns agreement to send people that come across the channel back. I think that is very unlikely, and I think that's unlikely to maybe even be discussed today. What is more likely is potentially talk and potentially a result of deepening some of the work that is already going on in terms of the patrols that are happening on the French side. We know that UK officials have been joining those French patrols from an agreement last year. There may well be more announcements and more money going to the French to fund that. The French are talking about some sort of kind of multi-year framework, so they have more of an idea of how much money is coming to them to fund that sort of work. So that may be more of the result that comes from this, but both sides acknowledge that actually boots on the ground over there isn't necessarily the way to solve this because of the nature of the French coastline. So you imagine there will be talks about trying to disrupt smuggling gangs, intelligence sharing as well. I think part of this, though, is about trying to almost put that cross-channel diplomatic relationship back on a more steady course. And when you listen to the French side, they seem really enthusiastic about the prospect of that. One Elysée official even quoting Casablanca saying this could be the beginning of a beautiful renewed friendship.
Interesting to watch the body language then, won't it? And those announcements. Rob, thanks very much indeed. And as we say, we will be talking to the Foreign Secretary later on this hour. In the meantime, though, awful weather in lots of the country today. Let's get a few more details.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, unsettled conditions will continue into the weekend with a mixture of rain, sleet, snow and strong winds. An amber warning remains in place for central parts of the country where heavy snowfall may lead to blizzards and drifting, causing significant travel disruption. A yellow warning of snow and ice covers a wider area. Scotland and Ireland will have a very cold, sunny start to the day. There'll be wintry showers for the far north and along North Sea coasts. Much of England and Wales will be cloudy with some outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow clearing south-eastwards. The wet weather will clear all but East Anglia through the morning with skies brightening from the northwest.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, before the break, we asked you to guess what nationwide competition that Peggy had just won. And Peggy, I can answer that question for you. Hopefully we can see a picture of Peggy. There she is. She's officially Britain's ugliest dog. I feel a bit mean even saying that out loud. She's a Chinese crested and pug cross. And this is the striking result of that genetic mix. With her permanently dangling tongue, her hairlessness and her scruffy mohawk, she's always attracted attention wherever she goes, as you can imagine. Peggy's owner runs a popular Instagram profile, updating it with lots of photos of her daily life. So if you've taken a fancy to Peggy, you can check in on that and keep up to date with her. Do stay with us. Coming up on Sky News Breakfast, we're going to be discussing that breaking news this morning that the British economy appears to be growing again. We'll have more on that shortly. Now, a survey of more than 1,000 head teachers in the UK has found 99% think children's mental health services are inadequate. The survey, conducted by the Association of School and College Leaders, also found widespread concern about the impact of poverty, abuse and neglect on children. Alice Porter has this report.
Tower Hamlets in East London has the highest level of child poverty in the country. With free school meals and uniforms, London Enterprise Academy is one of the many schools offering vital support.
I live in a low-income family myself, so I can see the struggles. I see the struggles every day. So when I come to school and just having a bite of toast from that, it just the hunger that I have from the night before, it just goes away.
Number 3 and number 4 are female.
A recent survey suggests head teachers across the country believe pupils are worse off since the COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis. 86% said more students were affected by poverty. 71% said more students were affected by abuse, and 99% said more students were affected by poor mental health.
If your school doesn't offer mental health, I feel like that would be it would be a problem. But our school does. It's been. I know a lot of people have benefited from this.
While schools play a large part in helping the mental well-being of pupils, social and economic factors are beyond their control.
We are surrounded by the wealth of Canary Wharf and the City of London. I want my children to go and aspire towards getting jobs in these places. But the reality is they've got a very difficult home life. They are living in severe overcrowding. A lot of families are being rehoused continuously, and at the moment the current austerity is having a huge impact.
The government says they have provided a £79 million boost to expand children's mental health services. But with kids across the country impacted by the cost of living crisis, it may not be enough. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, the UK appears to have outperformed expectations with growth of 0.3% in January. Former member of the Monetary Policy Committee at the Bank of England, Andrew Sentance, joins me now. So, Andrew Sentance, those figures just out from the ONS, a 0.3% rise in growth in January. Are you pleased to hear those figures? Are they better than expected?
I think they're slightly better than expected, though December was quite a weak month in terms of GDP. So it's not surprising to see some sort of bounce back. I think the big picture is that the UK economy is basically sort of flatlining at the moment and has been since about a year ago. So this is just, I wouldn't say this is a start of a big growth spurt. I think it's just part of the normal fluctuations that we see in these monthly GDP figures.
Spurt, but what about the chances of a recession now this year?
Well, I think most forecasters are expecting GDP across the whole year, 2023, to be down by about 0.8% or so. Now, that would represent a rather mild recession, because at times like in the global financial crisis, we saw GDP falling much more sharply than that, and we've seen that in previous episodes. So yes, it does seem that we'll have some form of mild recession, but unemployment is not expected to go up too sharply. It's below 4% at the moment. I think most forecasters are expecting somewhere around about 4.5% by the end of the year. So that's not a particularly high level of unemployment.
And how closely will Jeremy Hunt be looking at these numbers as he plans next week's spring budget? Just how much room for manoeuvre has he got with the economy growing at this rate?
Well, I think he will be looking at a much bigger picture. This is a monthly reading of GDP. And as I said, these figures fluctuate around from month to month. He won't be expecting the economy to be growing strongly this year. And as I say, it's probably going to factor in a modest decline in GDP for 2023, but probably will then factor in a rebound in 2024 and then beyond. But even when we get beyond into 2024 and 2025, growth is not going to be particularly strong in the UK economy. We've had an issue of fairly weak underlying growth going back a couple of decades, and I think we're going to see that pattern continue, even though we will sort of only just have a mild fall in GDP this year.
So what do you think that means in terms of what we might get from the Chancellor next week? How much scope has he got for spending or for tax cuts?
Well, I don't think he's got a lot of scope for tax cuts. I think he'll probably make some selective increases in spending because the inflation that we're seeing in the economy means that the government needs to increase spending just to keep things on an even course in areas like health and education. But I don't think we're in the ballpark of having large tax cuts, and I'm not sure we will be in that ballpark before the next election. There might be some modest tax cuts next year, but not necessarily, or later this year perhaps, but nothing dramatic.
Andrew Sanchez, thanks very much indeed for your time this morning and for your reading of those latest figures just in. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, GPs are facing insurmountable pressures, experts have said, as they warned the NHS will not survive without general practice. A new report into GP pressures suggests 1 in 4 say they fear their practice is in danger of closing because of unmanageable workloads as well as rising demand. Well, the chair of the Royal College of GPs, Professor Camilla Hawthorne, joins us now. So this is a survey that you've carried out, isn't it? Tell us a little bit more about your findings and the pressures that GPs say that they're facing.
Yes, so thank you, Kate. This is a survey that was carried out in December and January, just gone, of well over 2,000 GP staff members. And what it shows is that it's really starting to feel like it's winter all the time, winter pressures all the time, a bit like the Narnia story, always winter and never Christmas. What we're finding is that numbers of consultations are much higher than they were a couple of years ago, 9% higher. And, you know, in December last year, we would say that GPs are now responsible for about 2,200 patients each per full-time equivalent GP. And certainly when I first started general practice, it was a lot lower than that. It was more like 1,800. So the workload is going up hugely. Our population is aging. The number of people with chronic conditions is rising, and the number of people with more than one chronic condition is also rising. So the complexity of the cases that we're seeing is much more than it used to be. And when, as a busy GP on call, you're expecting to see somewhere between 40 and 60 patients in a day, you really cannot give people the time and attention that they need to be dealt with safely. And this is our real concern.
So worries for the patients, but what about the GPs themselves? What have they been saying about the stress they feel?
Yes, GPs are feeling very burnt out by this constant pressure. It's unremitting pressure, really. And a lot of people are going off sick. A lot of people are feeling very stressed. And a lot of people are leaving the profession. So even though the number of trainees has gone up, and we're now training about 4,000 new GPs a year, the number leaving the profession outstrips the numbers entering the profession. So we're now about 840 GPs down on where we were a couple of years ago. And that also is extremely worrying because the GPs who are leaving are very experienced clinical practitioners. And we're losing some really important, valuable skills that we need as a nation.
What do you want the government to do? I noticed that they say that there are 400 more doctors in general practice compared to a year ago. They also say they're delivering almost 120,000 extra appointments every day. What more would you like the government to do?
I think they first of all need to commit to some properly funded ways of improving things for general practice in the short to medium term. And of course, in the longer term, we do need more GPs. Our figures don't tally with the government's figures because we are quite certain that the numbers of GPs are falling. They're not rising. And it all depends on what you're counting, whether you're counting trainees as well as fully qualified experienced GPs or not. And we're counting fully qualified experienced GPs. We're not counting trainees. So we definitely need more GPs, but we also need better funding that's more easily accessible. So, for this last winter, the government did provide some additional winter funding, but it was very short term. It was difficult to apply for, and it was very inflexible. It didn't actually suit the different locality needs across the country. And so about 57% of our sample of GPs in our recent survey said that they weren't able to access that funding. So that needs to be improved quite considerably. We also need to invest in the IT systems and the support that we need to implement changes. Quite a lot of our samples said that their IT just wasn't fit for current practice and doesn't communicate well with secondary care. And we need to, of course, work much harder on retaining GPs, finding ways to allow GPs to stay in work, because what we're finding is that GPs are leaving, not just coming up to retirement, they're leaving straight after training, they're leaving in their 30s, their 40s, and their 50s. And all of them are leaving for slightly different reasons. And we need a flexible retention scheme that is nationally implemented to enable people to stay in practice.
OK, Professor Camilla Hawthorne, a really important issue. Thanks so much for talking to us about it today. Now, Rishi Sunak will meet with the French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris today. That's the first UK-France summit for 5 years. Well, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, is in Paris with the Prime Minister, and he joins me now. Very good morning to you, James Cleverly. Thanks for talking to us. So the government has announced its latest policy to try to stop small boats crossing the Channel this week. What do you need from this summit in France for it to succeed?
Well, obviously, illicit migration is an issue which is facing all European countries, including France. And the French and the British authorities have already been working together to prevent, as much as possible, people attempting to make that channel crossing. The French authorities have stopped around half of the attempted crossings. And through closer coordination, greater cooperation, we're hoping to be able to stop more. That will be part of what we discussed today. It's worth bearing in mind, of course, that the defence sector is here, the environment sector is here, trade ministers are here. So this summit is about more than just migration. It's about the full range of Anglo-French cooperation. But of course, we are looking to work closely with the French to try and break the model of these evil people smugglers who are making profit from the lives of others.
You talk about greater cooperation. Does that extend to a returns deal with France? Is that something that you want, a deal through which Britain can return these cross-channel migrants?
Well, what we are looking to do through our illegal migration bill is to send people back to their safe country of origin. There are many, many people, a very significant proportion of those people making illicit or attempting to make illicit channel crossings who originated from perfectly safe countries, and they should go there. We're also looking to make the application of asylum in other safe third countries part of it. And of course, we will discuss with France what more we can do. But this isn't about relying on any one particular element of this. This is about discussing the full range of international cooperation between the UK and France to deal with, ultimately, a shared problem between our two countries.
So it sounds like a returns deal isn't going to happen as a result of this summit, but will your policy work without one? As you say, you've promised to remove those entering on small boats within 28 days. Rwanda hasn't proved an option so far, and if a deal can't be done with our closest neighbour, where are these migrants really going to go?
Well, I personally and my officials in the FCDO have been negotiating with countries around the world about returns agreements. And of course, you've got to remember that the people on the French coast getting into small boats did not originate in France. So we are looking at ways of of sending people back to safe countries from which they originated. And we continue. We had a successful decision in the courts about our Rwanda scheme, and we will be looking at returning people to safe third countries or their own country of origin. But ultimately, whatever response we come up with, and it will require a mix of responses, we you know, your viewers should recognise that all this needs to be done with international cooperation. That's what this summit is about. That's the conversations that I've been having with other countries around the world, and we will continue to put real focus on this issue, which we know is at the forefront of many, many people's minds.
Real focus, and quite a lot of money as well is involved, isn't it? Britain's given France money to help stop these crossing through various deals. Will France be getting more money? Will there be a new deal? And how long might that deal cover?
Well, the precise details of how we operationalise, how we turn this joint focus into processes is part of what we're discussing today. And I don't want to speculate what the outcome of those negotiations between the Prime Minister and President Macron will be. But we have been working with the French, including UK part funding some of the French activities on the north coast of France. That has enabled France to, as I say, prevent around half of the attempted crossings. And so this is a model that has proved its effectiveness. We want to make it even more effective still. And of course, we will be negotiating about what the funding of additional work by the French authorities on the French coast will be. But as I say, I don't want to kind of speculate about live negotiations that we'll be conducting today.
This is the first summit with France since 2018, 5 years ago. Do you regret that? Do you think that unnecessary damage has been done to the relationship by the last two prime ministers?
Well, we've got to remember that in that intervening period of time, we have had delays because of the general election. We had the hung parliament, we had the general election, we had COVID. So there have been a number of things which have disrupted the ability to have this joint summit. It's a big event. A number of senior British ministers will be here having meetings with their French counterparts. But it is worth bearing in mind that we have been coordinating very, very closely with the French government, the French authorities, and a whole range of areas, notwithstanding the fact we've not had a formal summit. I speak with my French counterpart, not quite on a weekly basis, but I mean, certainly many, many times a month. And we find ourselves in close agreement on a number of really big issues, including, for example, Ukraine's self-defense against Russian aggression, about the nature of shifting balances of international trade, and a whole range of issues. So, of course, it's great that we've got this summit. It's a really, really good way of driving forward the bilateral relationship. But we have been working closely with the French authorities and the French government for some time anyway.
Last Prime Minister Liz Truss couldn't decide if President Macron was friend or foe. Was that regrettable?
Well, look, France is our nearest neighbour, a close ally, a good friend. The November of last year, I was invited to attend the French Armistice Day commemorations. We have a closeness and intimacy of relationship between the UK and France, which is perhaps unlike many around the world. And of course, we're very, very proud of the fact that economically, in terms of defence and a whole load of areas, France and the UK remain very, very close partners and friends.
OK, well, James Cleverly, Foreign Secretary, thanks very much indeed for your time this morning ahead of those meetings. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's take a look now what the weather's doing.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, unsettled conditions will continue into the weekend with a mixture of rain, sleet, snow and strong winds. An amber warning remains in place for central parts of the country where heavy snowfall may lead to blizzards and drifting, causing significant travel disruption. A yellow warning of snow and ice covers a wider area. Scotland and Ireland will have a very cold, sunny start to the day. There'll be some wintry showers for the far north and along North Sea coasts. Much of England and Wales, though, will be cloudy with outbreaks of rain, sleet and snow clearing southeastwards. The wet weather will clear all but East Anglia through the morning, with skies brightening from the northwest. Temperatures will range from 2 to 5 degrees in the north to 7 in the south. And more organised snow showers will spread into the far north later on. For most, it'll be a fine end to the day with some clear skies. Further cloud, rain and strong winds will spread into the southwest by dawn.